I call this meeting of the Operations Committee to order. This evening, we're going to continue discussing the budget, and we are starting with the 2019-2020 budget presentation from our food service department. Mr. Mencher?
Yes. Don, can you hear me? Yep. Okay, on page 1 of the food service budget.
By the way, we're in section 7.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so on the food service budget on page, it's made up of 3 pages. On the first page, we're just going to go over the totals of the projected that we're going to finish this year on a projection, and then we'll go right into the proposed budget for next year, 1920. We're projecting this year for revenues, total revenues, as you could see, 1,720,843, with expenditures of the same amount. And we're looking for a break-even point this year. We are projected, as mentioned, sales are good to include the revenue. Once again, we're just looking to meet our food cost needs on our expenditures. And if we could hold our food costs for the last 5 months, we have a very good chance of meeting this projection of a break-even point. For next year, on the same page, we're looking to increase the revenues by 1%, and the reason why we're at 1% is I backed out the work camps revenue, which was $31,000, and to make that up next year, I'm including that in with the 1%. So I don't feel we could grow the program 4, 5, 6% with losing that revenue from the summer. So that's why it's at a 1%. And then on our expenditures, to include the same, a 1% increase in expenditures. And also we're proposing to break out even for the following year. And the next 2 pages just breaks out the costs and the sales. On page 2, for the projection for this year, as you could see, we're projecting total cash sales, $957,419, with our revenues totaling $1.720,843. And as I've been reporting out for the last couple months, the federal reimbursements are helping us out quite a bit. Right now we're at about a 27% increase in federal revenues, which has helped us out considerably this year. And our cash sales up top there, we're projecting we're looking at like a 5% increase in the paid meals this year too. Overall, the program's up about 10%. And then for next year, we're proposing a 3% growth on the first line item of the sales, which is the student lunch paid, to include the a la carte business. And banquets would come down because, once again, we lose the work camp revenue, and we're going to go back down, and we're going to increase the revenue from 17, 18, 2% for banquets. So we're on line to hopefully get the 2% for banquets for next year, which totals the $953,882. The last page, page 3, is a detailed breakout of the costs. And the first section, as you could see, is the product costs, food costs, and then it goes down the line under projection with our personnel and our labor costs and our benefits, to include the operating expenses of $91,436, and total expenditures, like the summary said on page 1, was the $1,720,843. And the last column to the right, once again on the proposed budget for next year, it gives the breakout of the product costs. The personnel costs, we're going to increase the personnel by 1.5%. That number mainly coming from the union contract. There is year 3, the last year of the contract, there's no increase for the hourly employees. And then we had, this year, we paid out the $14,000 on the retirees, and next year we're not budgeting for any retirees to leave our system. And that's why labor looks like it's an even thing there. All in all, total operating expenses on the bottom right of the 3rd page, we're looking at a 7% increase on the operating expenses, all to tally over to page 1, which is the break-even point. Just a couple notes on my end before I ask for any questions. The price equity sheet that the state gives us is not out till to the spring. So right now we couldn't forecast a price increase, and we'll be able to do that later in the spring like we did last year for you guys and for the district to see if we have to do a price increase. That could change a few things too. So otherwise, Thurston, our prime vendor, I had a meeting with Tim last week, and his costs obviously go up too, and he's predicting a 2 to 4% increase all the way around too. So that's not a good number. It's usually 2%, but he mentioned the 4%. They're having a lot of trucking issues. There's a big shortage in trucking in the industry in general, and they're paying their people more money to keep them and so forth down the line. So it was nice to get an update from Mr. Thurston on projections for next year. Is there any questions I could ask on the program?
Mr. Votto?
Yeah, just the 14,000 with retirees. What is that exactly?
So what happened, Mike, is last year we had 2 employees resign in June from continuous amount of years here, and we paid them out, and we paid them out this summer, and it hit my statement for this year.
You pay them out?
Yeah. Sick time and vacation, yeah. So
That's
they
what that's
accrued a
for.
certain amount of time on the sick days for,
Okay.
one was,
And you don't predict any retirees this coming year?
no,
Coming year.
no, we did not propose that in the budget for next year, and that's why it's a wash on the labor. Total operating on the labor is the wash.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, on banquets, specifically, what kind of banquets are we currently doing?
Are we currently doing?
Yeah,
So we do all the off-premise catering for the district, to include Dr. Menzo's catering in central office, and the principal are ordering some foods from us on working lunches, and some breakfast connections that 2 of the principals in the elementary sector are doing. I'm sorry? Field days, yes. And we'll also target the field day like we did last year to keep the business from leaving the program. We'll try to capture that business again with a indoor barbecue menu, and I'm working with the elementary principals on that now to keep that in-house so we don't lose that revenue.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
If I could just add to the catering, just from a historical perspective, over the last 10 years, if we go back to my first year here, catering was a very high revenue line because we did a lot of it. We offered food at all of our events. There was a lot of functions that central office was offering for different staff, and it was very costly, but it was helping subsidize the program in that regard. However, the board, when we did an analysis our first year, especially during reconfiguration, which we knew if we were going to upset the lives of students and families, we then had to take a deeper and closer look at what we were funding for food for our different activities in the district. So it went from about $65,000, if I remember at that time, down to less than $10,000 or around $10,000. And we really tried to pare down. What Dave is doing and what we tried to do in the previous years was really target those outside groups, like the PTOs who have, there's really been a focus on the part of our administrators. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more equitable in terms of making sure that all students are able to have lunch and making sure that there's an opportunity. So we've looked at the PTOs for a variety of functions. They've been very supportive, the athletic associations, as Dave has mentioned. But we used to do like full dinners for varsity scholars. It was a dinner. It was shrimp and prime rib, and we used to do all of those things. There were functions sponsored by central office, which it was, it was a different time. It was appropriate for that time when the money was there, but then there was a time when the money wasn't there. So this line item, I'm pleased to see it continue to increase, not on the back of the Board of Education, so to speak, in the sense that we're putting more money into it, but that we're leveraging the resource we have and not adding costs to parents, but just taking away or providing an opportunity where the parents and schools aren't always going to outside vendors and keeping it in-house.
Mrs. McKay?
So, piggybacking on that, I mean, it was, literally, 2 years ago, we were looking at, 2 years ago, we were looking to outsource the program because of the major losses we were potentially looking at. And to have turned the program around this significantly is a credit, really, Dave, to you and your staff. And I like the fact that you're being conservative for an overall increase of 1% growth. I think you have potential to be higher than that for different reasons, but I appreciate you being conservative, and especially when looking at all the aspects. We were looking at major losses as recently as 2 years ago. So again, I appreciate how you've really looked at this and been really thoughtful about how you're going to save money but yet still provide a wonderful product, a fresh product, a good product to our students. And I know that's not easy. You came from a situation where all marketing and all that was provided to you from your company, and now as an independent, working as in our cafeteria, you own it, and that's not easy. That's not an easy transition, and I appreciate everything that you've tried to initiate. Some things have worked, some things maybe haven't been as successful as you thought, but you're willing to try anything. And always, I feel in my heart that you're always put students first in terms of providing a fantastic product that's fresh and appealing and healthy for our students, but yet also worried about our bottom line. Not easy to do. And to have a projection of break even is phenomenal. So I applaud the work that you've done, and I am assuming it isn't done in a vacuum. Your staff have also worked diligently to look at ways to save money, cut costs. But again, I can't underscore the importance of a fresh, healthy, and tasteful product that our students want to eat. So, I know how hard you've worked, and I sit on your strategic plan committee, and you're always open to all ideas, and you never shun any thought or aspect of, gee, try this, try that, and so congratulations. I hope this comes to fruition. You do your best job as far as your projections, and you have a fickle audience, if you will. They're students, and whether they're going to eat it or not, or, there's a lot of unknown entities. So I appreciate your conservativeness of a 1% increase. And I think that you've done a phenomenal job. So I just want to go on record as saying that.
Further remarks on the food
Just to-
service?
If I could just ask one question. We're fully staffed, correct?
As of this month, we will be. We still have the 3 openings, but the good thing is we have 3 new people coming on that took the test for certification that were substitutes, and they're going to roll over to permanent employees. So we're going to be full, first time in a long time. And we had
Well,
7 open positions at one time, I heard, and
Correct.
we're at 0 possibly.
So that's an important thing, and that's
And-
really, there was a comment that Dave made about the salary increase, that either the union took a 0, but there is a 1.5% increase in that line item. The reason is because we're bringing on full-time employees, not having this substitute pay. So I just wanted, just in case somebody caught that at home, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. He said a 0, but there's a 1.5% increase. What are they doing? That's an interesting math. That has nothing to do with the Common Core. That is just the fact that we're fully staffed. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I would also echo the comment that the staff has done a remarkable job, and we thank them very much for their support, as well as Karen in the office.
I
Her
couldn't do it
transition
myself,
to
and-
central office was
yeah.
smoother than I think she even anticipated. Now she's part of the
Right.
family, and I don't think we'd want to go back. So,
Right.
Mrs. Castelli?
So, Dave, I should know this, but it's just escaping me. For this current year, is the Board of Ed subsidizing you do we have anything for you in the budget at
As
all?
of now, no.
No, there's nothing. I know, I just took a quick scan. We're not proposing any thing for the future too. So I think that's important to point out too, because for the past few years, we have been
That's real
subsidizing. So it's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Other remarks on the food service budget presentation?
would the board want to take consensus on that this evening if they
Yes.
feel
Yeah.
comfortable?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any further remarks? All right, we'll take consensus, starting with Mr. Votto.
Yes.
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 And yes, thank you. The next item is the board member percentage ideas. Now, I believe that we stopped at 2.89% at our
Correct.
last meeting.
If I could indulge, I just want to, I know that we missed
Absolutely.
a week. I just want to make sure that we get this on air, just the update. These tend to be helpful for parents and staff. And I did provide copies to those in the audience. I'm not going to go through every slide in great detail because a lot of it is redundant information that's been provided. You had this as a board. I sent it out into your Friday packet, so you had a chance to peruse everything, so you didn't feel blindsided or having to have a lot of reading to do on this spot. So the first thing is we had asked, Ms. Corso asked that very, very important question, which I think it allowed us at central office to really take pride in what we've been able to accomplish. So it was about the 1%, what's left in it, and we wanted to give the updates. So we provided all of you, and I'll move out of the way. Basically what we provided you back in 2014, there was about $369,000 that was in the 1% account. We expended the 318,000 or 319,000 of it, and there's still 50,000 that was committed. Meaning the difference between expended and committed is that it's money that is allocated for items. It's just a matter of the fact that we've been dealing with purchasing or we've been dealing with timing of the different projects. So you could see that, again, going through, if you follow this through, each year we've done a fairly good job of expending and then committing. And again, you'll see that there's some committed line items that are large. It's just because they're larger projects that have to go through review with the town, review with engineering, all those different elements. So they're not lost. They're just taking a little bit more time in the pipeline, so to speak. Last year, in 2017-18, you know that we committed the $700,000 worth of the special ed. So that's why there's that remaining amount. So that's why you see that large number there. So again, when you look at the total allocated, it was 3.3 million. Expended at this time of that was 1.6 million. There's $948,000 that are committed, and it's resource. Sometimes there is money that's left over in the remaining, so that's where you have the 22,000. But there's that 702 that we haven't allocated anywhere. It's there for special ed. We could reallocate the 702 at any time that we want as a board. We just have to go to the town council. And even with the 948, we could bring back to you what jobs those consist of, and we could even look at whether or not we want to continue with those if there was a concern on the board that there was a major project we want to accomplish. So we've been really monitoring this very closely. So if you look at the committed in special education, you're at 1.6 million that we could allocate again, we want to make sure we go through all of this.
Mrs. Corso?
Yep.
The special education, $700,000, that can be used towards any type of overage and/or additional outplacement at any point?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. We did that, as you remember, and I'll just say this for TV, people watching on TV, we were concerned because the state was cutting money so rapidly, and they were going to look to sequester funds at the federal level, and we were really concerned. And so we went to the council, and you all, thank goodness, were very supportive of this. We said, we want to be proactive. We don't want to be the board that comes to you and says, we need $350,000, give it to us. So that money there, Ms. Corso, spot on. Anyway, we just didn't want to hire staff with it. Reoccurring expenditures. An outplacement is a reoccurring expenditure, but we would get some reimbursement based on the threshold if they do the 4.5 times percent over $75,000 threshold.
Mrs. McKay?
Yeah, so the committed, it's just shy of 950. I'm assuming that's mainly for, well, obviously non-recurring.
It's
but
large capital.
It's large capital. So how challenging would it be to just, do you have an itemized list of what that
We could-
950-ish
we can
is going-
definitely get that list for you.
Okay, just to keep us
we just-
apprised.
Certainly, yeah. We didn't want to get too much into weeds with
Right.
this just yet, but we feel that we can take a look at that closer. Mr. Barone, I don't know if you want to add.
I just want to say a lot of that's from the current year, so we reallocated them. We went to the town a few months ago.
Right.
So a lot of the projects from there are still in that, like.
Got it,
there was a
right, that
bunch of
makes
money
sense.
for
So the bulk of
security,
it, I mean, yeah, so yeah, I guess I would look at board members.
Well, because see, if you see on the 18-19, 5 of the 7 of that amount, of the 948,000,
Yep.
586 of it, we haven't had a chance to use yet.
Still remaining.
That's,
Well, that's just that we allocated this
this
year.
year, the
Which we haven't had a
586.
chance to start spending down.
right,
Because we had to go to the town to get the account set up. That takes the fall usually.
Right, right.
So now you'll see that number decreasing. So it's really the difference, the 586,
and then the
820.
158, really, from the prior year, yeah, the 158.
It's really, yeah, it's
It's
taking,
probably the bulk of it right there, Sal.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, that's just, so, I'm always very reluctant to make extra work for you guys. How challenging is it to provide us generally what that, 948
It's not that
represents?
difficult because we get monthly reports on these
Okay.
accounts.
Okay.
from the
So
town.
if it could, just to refresh board members.
sure.
Is that good for board members to have that? Okay,
The key thing is you have the flexibility still.
right. And I'm not looking
And
to
we
make
want-
changes per se.
No, but we want to, that's why we were happy to provide this, because we want the town to know
Right.
that, again,
Again, the transparency piece.
it's totally there. I mean, if there, and we're fortunate because, God forbid, there was an issue that we needed to replace some major system. We have still some money to go to without having to tax the taxpayers.
Right, and that, honestly, I know this is the 1% account, I understand. But also, as a reminder, last year, we returned a little over 400,000 to the town based on the fact that it was not needed and, so that's extra beyond this, so.
Correct.
Just again, for transparency purposes.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Votto?
So just to be clear, the 586 is already committed for this school year.
Correct.
So that would be, so with the 948, it would be minus that amount of money.
Correct.
Okay. And as far as that special ed money, is that like for unexpected expenses?
Correct.
I know we've talked about this.
No,
for
as Ms.
a year.
Corso said, it would be unexpected outplacements that come in
Outplacements.
that we didn't budget for, and that our budget this year wasn't able to accommodate. Was not able to accommodate. So, for example, if we say, for example, we went through our contingency and we
Right.
were in the red significantly,
Then we
you know,
go to
up to
the-
700,000,
Right.
we're not there. But we didn't know because the state was
Yeah.
so
Thank you.
tough.
Yeah.
2 years ago, the governor was cutting so many different things. They cut us $337,000 in October 2 years ago. That was just came upon us. And then there was a whole issue where they didn't know what the budget was going to be that whole year. And so we said, you know what? We can't put ourselves in that position. We can't put taxpayers in that position. We can't even put the mayor and the council in that position. That's not fair to them. So that's why we put that in there. And they were, from what I recall at that meeting, everybody was very appreciative of that.
Yep.
However, we also said there might be a time where we realize, okay, we don't need to be that aggressive, and then the board can go back to the council and say, you know what, we're still going to leave, and I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying I'm recommending this. We're still going to leave 350,000 of the 700, but we're going to use 350 towards, say, this, a renovation project somewhere in the district. I won't select one, but a renovation project in the district at one of our schools.
Thank you.
All right. So the next thing was percentage increase for the next 2 years if the Board of Education were to approve any of the strategic plan positions. So this chart shows the fact that we had started with a 2.4% for 2019-20 for sustained services. Then if we added just the teacher for medical careers, it would go up for 2.4% this year. Next year, if you follow that column across, that would be a 2.6% increase, and the following year, a 2.89% increase. That's the sustained plus just adding that one position to keep it going forward, because those are reoccurring costs. The following, if you go down one more, it's that position plus the communications, part-time communications specialist, and then you could follow that across for the 3 years. The next one is, again, those two items plus the additional coaches, following that across 3 years. And the last one, as Ms. Levack started off with, so it's perfect, was that we left off last week, or last time, 2 weeks ago, with a 2.89, and you could follow that across the 3 years. Now, the thing is that you'll note that the increase goes down. Do you want to explain that piece, Dominic?
I don't understand that. Make sure I'm on, sorry.
Yeah.
The second and third year it goes down because we're not using the same exact assumptions. The first year is obviously the most accurate because it's next year. We've got all our data here, but as we move it out forward, we just come up with an average and use that average to bring it across. Does that make sense?
So again, we wanted to share this with you just because there was questions, and it was a good question. While it's great to be able to set a budget tonight or at any point, set a budget with these positions, what is the long-term commitment on the part of the Board of Education or whomever gets this next? Oh, sorry, Jared. I apologize.
Mrs. Purcell?
All right, I'm still confused, sorry. So in the second year, if we just get one of those teachers, or if we have all four of those teachers, or all four of those different things added, it's still only 2.65?
Yeah, and it's going up because we're comparing it to the first year, so the base is going to increase as we add things. So the strategic items move into the sustained every year.
Okay.
That's
So-
the thing, is your base goes up the most by doing the total thing.
So
So
that's
you
why the
start with a
average-
higher base, so
Okay.
then your actual percentage does decrease, it's not as high.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. This was a question that we receive always from the public, so I'm not going to read all this because there's a lot of information, and we have provided a variety of documents, the job classifications. So instructional coaches. So I provided some information about the math coaches, and again, I'm not going to be one of those presenters that read every bullet of a PowerPoint. So there are several slides that talk about the math coaches, variety of work in the classroom directly with students as well as directly with teachers, as well as looking at data from a district perspective, building perspective, and then engagement with families, collaborates with administrators, conducts lesson observations, does not evaluate. They're not an administrator, these are still teachers. So we just want to make a clarification. These are still in the teachers union. These are not administrators. So again, a lot of looking at the resources, And again, there's 2 math coaches for the entire K-5 system, pre-K-5 system, so 1 on either side of town. So that's really, the focus is really on instructional strategy. They're not there to evaluate, they're not there to supervise, but they're there to provide that additional resource. They can be recommended by a principal that a teacher access these resources, and it could go beyond recommendation to you are going to have these resources with you because we see a need for support. So that's their focus. And in doing so, when they're working with the teacher, they're also working with students. So the same thing pretty much for the instructional coaches for English Language Arts. There's 1 on either side of town. Again, some other things that I didn't mention for the math, but the math do as well as the ELA, is the professional development opportunities, embedded professional development, district-wide professional development, half-day early release professional development. They work with performance task development for teachers. They look at vetting curriculum and resources. Again, a lot of the same data activities, family nights, collaborates with administrators. Do not, again, this person or these 2 people do not evaluate, they observe. They can scribe lessons and offer feedback and critical feedback, provide that information to administrators to help supplement their evaluations of staff in their schools. And they also, the ELA coach really has worked primarily at the elementary level. In addition to all of this work, they've also worked in the area of ERLA, and making certain that our teachers have employed those strategies successfully with students. Provide small group instruction. As I said, they do have direct instructional time with students when they're in classrooms, showing and demonstrating, setting up lab classrooms in schools. Both of these 2 content areas do that on a regular basis. All right. Where do we leave off? So that's basically where we're going to end, is that combined at this point, we still had the sustained services at 2.4, strategic plan budget. We had taken out all of the items that were capital, non-reoccurring, and so that left us with a 2.89. And again, this just explains it. The capital expenditures were $497,377. And the potential use of 1% funds, $529,500. So that's what brought us down to the 2.89. All right.
Mr. Votto?
I just want to be clear. Last year, this present year, the increase we did finally receive was what,
I believe it was a 1.16.
1.7, correct?
What?
I want to say 1.8.
Yeah, 1.17.
That's what we got as a.
Yes, we had originally been granted about $411,612 more.
Yeah.
So we had been granted a 1.2, 1.22.
Okay. So basically, if we don't add in those last 3 things, we would submit a 2.40 budget.
Correct.
As a sustained.
If we add those other 4 positions, it would be 2.89.
Correct. And then it goes back to this chart. This kind of gives you a menu based on what you were talking last time. I think there was what I heard, but again, this would be for you to discuss and come to a consensus on, is I did hear somewhat of a consensus on the medical careers teacher. So I think what you were really leaving with somewhat of a consistent consensus on was the 2.47, and I think the rest of the items were up for debate. As I shared with you, we have already talked to our staff, and we understand that there's always a need for additional support at the building level, both instructionally and in terms of support for our administrators. However, I believe that both groups understand that those are 2 items that at this time we understand if the board doesn't support, and we understand that it's not based on the fact that they don't want to support those. It's just that you have to be fiscally responsible. It's not a criticism of their request or denial of the request. It's just trying to put things in a realistic place. The communications specialists, I know there's been a lot of conversation about that. Personally, again, it's something we put in there because it's been in the strategic plan. We do have, obviously, there's a lot of different opportunities for that person that we don't presently have, that we've doled out those responsibilities to a variety of individuals that are salaried employees. And again, as we continue to have opportunities to communicate with the public on a regular basis at very early hours or very late hours, that consistent opportunity with somebody who's been trained in this could potentially assist in those matters. But again, it's not a critical job when you look at what are critical needs versus what are nice to have. It's something that we can continue to do, and we don't necessarily need the position. But there are other things that, obviously that person can do that could potentially move communication forward. So.
Mrs. McKay?
So I'm gonna just put it out there. I have no idea where board members are in terms of, are they ready to consider what their magic bullet number is? I'll put it out there that if you, Madam Chair, to test the waters and just get a sense. I'm ready to make decisions, and I would even, keeping this screen up, I really feel strongly about the CNA teacher position, and I feel strongly about the communication specialist position. Those, I feel, really are important areas that the community, the mayor, and the town council need to know that, in my mind, those are vital to move us forward. We could talk about the instructional coaches or the dean of students, but I'm even willing at this point to suggest, and I'll make a motion if you want me to, Madam Chair, but to even accept.
It'll just be consensus.
Okay, yeah, that's true. It is just taking consensus, but I at this point I think it would be incredibly prudent and appropriate for us as a board to submit a 2.5% budget increase, a strategic plan budget, and a sustained services budget of 2.40 with a strategic of 2.50. I think that is responsible. It's appropriate, and it's a great place to start off in terms of conversation with the community at large and the mayor and the town council in terms of saying this is what we need to move the district forward. So that's where I'm just putting it out there for that conversation, and whether, I don't know if board members are prepared to comment or weigh in, or they need more information, that's fine too, but that's where I'm just gonna jump right in and make my point.
Mrs. Purcell?
Just a quick question back
Yep.
to you. What was your final number? 'Cause
So
it's
the,
bounced
I
around.
would say the 2.50, which would include the communication specialist and the CNA.
Okay.
As a strategic plan budget, as a sustain's nothing
It's
to talk
sustain.
about. That's
Got it.
2.40.
Yeah, we would just submit to the mayor
Right.
as a
I-
2.5.
Yeah.
2.5,
And
okay.
then, in my mind, I really feel, and I've articulated, I could articulate it again, why I feel strongly about the CNA teacher and the, yeah, I don't mean
I
for
just
you,
wanted
Patty.
the number.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm proposing a sustained services of 2.40 and a strategic
Yeah.
total of 2 point.
Yeah, I would just, for clarity,
5.
for those watching at home, a 2.5% increase.
Okay, fair enough. So
That's
I
easier
would
to
say that,
Yeah.
yeah, an overall budget increase, is that a good way to put it? An overall budget increase of 2.50 is submitting that to the mayor and to the, ultimately to the town council as what we need to move the school system appropriately forward for the next academic year. That's my opinion.
All right, what's the pleasure of the board? Do we want to go board member by board member and talk about where your percentage that you have in mind is? And we can start with Mrs. Corso.
Sure. So I think I look at this a little bit differently. Given the amount of money that's still committed in this 1% fund, I want to go back and really look at what that's committed to and how we can allocate that differently. Now, I'm really supportive of leaving money in there for special education costs, because I know how expensive it could be to incur a transfer student who has an IEP who outplaces them at a very expensive facility. So I think it's important to leave that in there. I'm not sure if $752,000 is overkill for that, so I'm wondering if that could be cut down. But I added up the other committed costs plus the remaining, and we're looking at about, plus if we cut the, say we cut that special ed in half, we're looking at an additional $734,000, which is, and we're still leaving $350,000 in a special ed fund.
The only
That's already committed to the 1%
Yeah.
account, so
Right.
we can't.
the only other challenge is that we don't have $730 whatever $1,000 of non-reoccurring expenses left in our budget.
So I'm wondering if we can
That's my-
reallocate that to our
Strategic plan?
yes, our current strategic
Yeah,
plan.
so I think that would be, we would have to look at, that's something that we could definitely do at any point. We could bring that list to you. I think that's a really good point. And I think that's what we talked about. And I think that that's what we need to talk about, is bring back the items just to bring everybody up to speed that aren't finished. And then you could reevaluate them as a board and say, like you're saying, Aaron, I 100% agree. Our priorities changed. And that might be what you all agree to, that, okay, you had 120,000 for this, and now, you know what? While it's been taking us this long, maybe there's a reason why it's taken us this long. And we need to put it to a different strategic plan item that we haven't been able to accomplish.
So my
I
other,
agree with you.
Yep, my other concern is, I hear and I support the CNA program. I think it's very important, and I think it's very important that our kids graduate from high school with certifications for some of them. However, there are other, when we're looking at how it's gonna impact the budgets next year and the year, moving forward, I'd rather see something that's going to impact more students than 40 to 50 students a year. So, and that's what the CNA teacher additional impacts, 40 to 50 students a year. The communication specialist could impact the entire district, all students. Instructional coaches is K through 5 or K through 8, however they're gonna be used. So I just wanna see it, if we're gonna stretch this budget, to stretch it to the most amount of students possible, to impact the most amount of students possible. So that's where I am. I don't know how my percentages fall out, to be honest with you, but it would be less than 2.5%. I don't know exactly how they fall out.
All right, fair enough.
That's where I am.
Mrs. Castelli?
So I can support everything Roxanne said, and I appreciate everything Aaron said as well. Something that's been on my mind lately has been the Wallingford 100 and students meeting 100 success, getting every student to be 100% successful. And I'm seeing firsthand, actually, because I spent a day at DAG and I spent a day at Lyman Hall recently, that maybe we need, I'm kind of in agreement with her about the CNA. I absolutely support the program. But if we're talking about 100% success for all students, and this I'm just opening up. I'm not, I need the experts to tell me what we need to do. But I want to hear from the principals, the administrators at the middle schools and the high schools. Is there a need for more intervention?
We're already addressing that. We talked about that at the first budget meeting, but we don't need additional allocated resources.
Okay,
We believe we
don't.
have resources through our walkthroughs. We recognize that we have resources in our buildings that maybe could be utilized in a different manner or consolidated to provide additional resources necessary. So that's in the hands of our administrators right now to come back to us with a plan.
Okay.
We put it
Good.
back to them.
Good, I'm glad to
They
hear that.
have to do that.
Yeah.
That's their job. Now, if they don't come back with a plan, then we'll have one prepared for them to consider. But the fact is, that's their role. We also are in the process of finalizing, hopefully, an agreement with an outside resource that, again, will look at other funds, not that you have to add funds to the district, to do some intensive training for interventionists and special ed teachers in the area of reading strategies. And I'm saying it broadly because there's so many different programs, and I don't want to name any of them. And sometimes it's better not to go with a program, but to go with a toolbox of strategies rather than saying we're going to use this program versus that program. So we just received our second proposal today. We're reviewing those on Monday with our 2 special ed coordinators, Danielle, Carrie, and myself. It's very exciting what we have proposed to us. It'll put us at the forefront working with all students. And the way that one consultant put it is that we want 80% of our students reading on grade level. And that is not a 1-year goal. That's not a 2-year goal. That has to be a 3 to 5-year goal. But not losing track of students along the system. Sometimes we have people who want us to start at kindergarten and gradually move up. But my comment is, what about that 8th grader?
Right.
I'm not telling that 8th grade parent that you know what, your child wasn't here for this, so therefore they don't get it.
Right.
So we're actively pursuing that, but these are initiatives that we do not believe at this present time that we need to add additional funds into the budget. We think we could work within the numbers we have, plus look at different grants. I'll be looking at the IDA grants a little differently, and we can access some large funds there to hopefully cover some of these expenditures too.
Awesome. Well, so that's very good news. I'm glad to hear that, because again, I was very, I won't say I've been losing sleep over it, but it certainly has been keeping me up a little later at night thinking through some of the things that I experienced. And I would suggest if anybody's got time to go sit in on a class, it was a great experience. Phenomenal teaching, I have to say. The teaching was great. The kids, especially at the middle school, very engaged. I was really astounded at how engaged
Mr.
some of
Votto,
them were.
middle school.
Honestly. But again, concerns with those kids that are struggling. And I want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence in ensuring them 100% success.
Well, and I think the point you bring up, and I really appreciate too, is the fact that I think it's again another example, a visible, real example of how we have to continue to improve ourselves and look at things differently, and that how our population's needs continue to evolve as well.
Yeah.
And I think that we can't be too aggressive at all in what we do. And I think that I'm very, very excited about our proposals that we're receiving, that we're reviewing in these areas. I believe, and I think Carrie and Danielle and I looked at one this afternoon, and we were like, this could really be transformative.
Excellent.
So we're and we're talking about highly trained experts in their fields.
Great, thank you. So with that said, I guess I can support the 2.5. I'm looking back historically. Last year we proposed 2.42.
Yes.
We got the 1.17. The year before was 2.99, and before that it was we were in the 4s. So I think we've really done an outstanding job for our community in lowering the amount that we're requesting, knowing full well that whatever we request is not the amount we're going to receive necessarily. Maybe we will. Maybe one of these years they'll surprise us. But understanding that there's the potential for that amount to be cut. But I think we've done an outstanding job every year in bringing that amount down to a very realistic figure. So.
Well, and I think, again, just as a point of clarification, observation, information, whatever we want to say, last year we had one of the lower budgets in the region that was awarded to us, and then we gave back $411,612. And on this year, if we had a 2.5 right now, even if you sent in a 2.89, you'd be lower than every other district around us. Not that that's a benchmark that we want to live up to or compare to, but I think it's important because sometimes, and maybe there will be an article that'll have a chart of where different districts come in and what percentages and what they're awarded versus what they request. Maybe that's something that'll be done in local newspapers. But when the articles are written separately, people don't necessarily tie the columns together, and they don't read each other's town's news, especially when you're reading on the cell phone. You go to Wallingford and you look at Wallingford News, you go to Cheshire, but you don't see those connections. But I do know that regardless, we would be at a lower percent. And again, that's not something that's a good thing. We always want to, do what's right by students.
Mm-hmm. But to your point, in comparing to other towns, I think it's also important for the public to be aware that it's not always apples to apples either.
Correct.
And I believe it's medical insurance that in some towns comes out of the town budget as opposed to the
Well,
Board of Ed budget?
And sometimes there's a variety of nuances to
Yeah.
everyone's budget. So I think that's one of those challenges. And it depends on the federal dollars they're receiving also. That there's some towns that
Correct.
receive many more federal dollars
Right.
that oftentimes can skew the requests.
Right,
also.
so again, just so the public is aware, you can't always just say, oh, Cheshire only asked for this much and Wallingford's asking for this much. It's not an apples to apples comparison.
And we're very pleased that the grand list growth was the largest, I believe, since 2008, if I remember reading correctly this past weekend. Not that we want to spend it in a crazy manner, but it puts us, as a town, I think that everybody should be very proud of the EDC and Tim Ryan and their hard work of making sure that businesses stay in town and then attract businesses to town.
Thank you. Mr. Ross?
I'm kind of in agreement with the 2.5%. I'm concerned about maintenance, some maintenance issues coming up pretty quick, that we get these covered. I know we have some issues like at Lyman Hall with some of the fields. We have, last year, our softball team only played 2 of 11 home games at our field. And there's maintenance coming up, and I see we're considering them with renovation, but I'm concerned that I think a lot of these that, in my opinion, need to come up this year. So I'm concerned. I like the 2.5, but again, I agree. The instructional coaches, I'm not in favor of it all. But I'm really concerned about maintenance coming up, and it's going to bite us in the back.
No, and I think that going back to Ms. Corso's comment, I think that's something that we can look at. I think, again, there's a lot of open items because we still have our facilities update coming on March 11th, a month from Monday. So we can then talk about the 1%, and maybe there are some of those items that have to be shifted over. I think that's a great conversation.
I know that's a month away, but meanwhile, we're going to have a softball field.
Yeah,
with
and
a new-
unfortunately, Mr. Ross, you know that there's no way, even if the money were allocated tomorrow,
Yeah.
that we could get the work done just because of the processes in purchasing
No, yeah.
at the town, unfortunately. And it's not unfortunately that it's a bad thing, it's the nature of the responsibility that we have to the town.
Okay.
Okay,
Next.
thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, right now I'm looking at the 2.47%. I also want to add to what Kathy was saying is that, once again, the taxpayers should realize that, again, we don't, when we're looking at other towns, Cheshire or North Haven or whatever, sometimes we aren't comparing apples to apples. And correct me if I'm wrong, don't some towns subsidize, like the cafeteria?
Oh, yeah.
Expenses,
Yeah.
technology and things like that. So considering what we are paying, or what are we purchasing or paying out of this budget, I mean,
You're absolutely right. That's a really good point because there's two different things that was, because towns themselves, the actual fiscal side of the town, the municipal side of the town pays for, like we learned with the food services, some of them fund the retirement benefits and the pension plans and medical insurance. So our food services, and to Dave and his staff's credit, we don't do that, so that has to be encompassed in their budget. And then other towns also tend to pay for other things that the board takes on, like you said, a lot of the maintenance costs. So I think we get a lot for the money that the board is given, and I know it's a lot of money. I totally get that, and I know we've been accused, me personally been accused by, not having a percentage increase every year, that we should have 0. And again, usually I'll reach out to those individuals, sit down with them over a cup of coffee, go through every line item, and they realize that it's not that easy because of the amount of resources that we need to provide our students.
Yeah, and one last comment, I've had people approach me and say that by using these percentages, but they're percentages of a larger,
Base.
Exactly, so the base keeps increasing, but then I turn to say that a lot of our increase in expenses, salaries, benefits. You just mentioned, food prices, things like that, so.
Well, we have that whole uncontrollable cost section of the PowerPoint that I initially give. for the last 2 years, that if people just read that, if we didn't have increases in the uncontrollable costs, things that we have to do in order to run our district, you know, it would be a no-brainer. And again, if we didn't give back the $400 and something thousand, we'd have an additional $400 something thousand that we would pre-tax people on. So we're trying to wean our way out of that as well, and be a department to set an example.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Raccio?
So I am also fine with the 2.5%. I think I spoke before about the communication specialist, and I just want to be clear that as a half-time position, it doesn't mean that only half of the work would get done. It just means that the other half would be done by people who have other duties and just kind of take that on above and beyond what they're already doing. So I would have liked to have seen that as it was presented in last year's budget as a full-time position, but we can't have everything. The one thing, though, that, and I don't know if this is a board discussion item for tonight or not, but we kind of touched on it last time, we haven't talked about it tonight, is if we did add a grant position and it wasn't a budgetary impact because it was going to be on a commission basis or based on their successful grant writing, is that something that we have to take action for, or is that something that you could possibly pursue finding that person without us doing anything?
Correct. We're going to wait till the dust settles on what you decide on this, and then what we're looking at is getting some samples of contracts that we could then proceed with. What we want to do is continue to look at something on a part-time basis for a variety of reasons. So we're willing to bring back something to the board, if not March, April, on that topic.
Okay, because I think as we talk about consultants coming in, and if you're going to do any type of IDA intensive training, there may be some more opportunities there.
Absolutely.
So, good, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Purcell?
Yeah, first I just have a clarifying question. Aaron, you asked about the 1%, and could it be stretched into the sustained budget? And right now we only have 4 items in the sustained budget for this year, and they're all reoccurring. But normally that 1% is only for things that aren't reoccurring. Are you asking to put it in for one of these 4?
Yes.
Okay.
And I understand it's not normally for reoccurring, but it's part of our strategic plan budget. It's not, so for next year, it would be part of strategic plan, which we have it in for strategic plan, and we're not supposed to use that for reoccurring, but it's in there. And then the following year, it's sustained.
Okay.
So I'm trying to do some quick math over here.
Yeah,
But I think I am gonna end up splitting hairs. If we're all looking at 2.5, mine's gonna come out to like 2.42, so I'm splitting hairs anyway, but,
The only thing, though, I just want to mention is that we did make a commitment, and this was important for the mayor to approve the 1%, is that we wouldn't use that money it could be used for strategic plan items, but they could only be non-reoccurring
Right.
in nature.
Okay.
That was even though the statute gives towns the ability to afford that opportunity to boards of education, we knew that was a long road for us to travel, and some towns never, as you know, some towns never even got this opportunity to do this. So we didn't force the issue. So again, we really would want to hold true to that.
I just think that there's a ton of money in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer money in there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm fine with the 2.5 too.
Mr. Votto?
Okay, honestly, I really don't think it matters, because we have to wait to see what the mayor's gonna do anyway. I could say 2.89 and get all those things in that we like to get in, and still call us fiscally responsible and doing what's best for children. So I don't want people to be misled by that comment.
Absolutely.
The only thing, I'm fine with 2.5, but if by some miracle we were to get more, I'm not so sure I would want some of those things added in. I think there might be other things, and I was going to say a grant writer is one of them, because that's getting us more money, and I think that's important. I'm not sure about textbooks. I know we keep saying there is money put in, but I'm wondering if we could put more in. We heard the other night how the social studies curriculum was brought up and how updated K-5, and at that point they said they didn't have textbooks. Is that correct?
Right. Currently, they're looking at different resources that align with that curriculum, but Mr. Francesi also said that there is money in our current operating budget for that purpose. For K-5,
For
what you
K-5.
approved, yes. So if, as they are piloting the resources, they determine that they are the best match, they will go through the approval process with the Board of Education as they normally do. And there is money in the current operating budget for that as a placeholder.
But is there a need for books in other areas as well?
There are.
I'm
You
sure
know,
there are.
as we talked about, I think, the last budget meeting, through our curriculum review cycle, for example, AP Latin, there's a math text, there's a science text, all of which are going through the protocol for the selection of textbooks that will come to the board in the spring for approval. All of that money is reserved to use either through unencumbered funds or otherwise. But yeah, you know, as the curriculum is being updated and brought to you for approval, the textbooks are also being reviewed as well so that everything is current and aligned to the new revisions that are being made.
Did you know I was going to ask that question? That was very good.
We've had a lot of internal conversations because there's a lot of literacy materials that we want to purchase. You know, so we really want to make sure that no one feels that we're reducing resources
No,
to
I know
students.
that, yeah.
No, publicly, we've been very, again, that's part of, I'm lucky to have the team that I have. You know, this is what we talk about on Wednesday mornings, on Monday mornings, Thursday afternoons, Friday at 5:30.
My only point is to make that there might be other things I feel personally in the strategic plan.
Absolutely.
That might take priority over some of these other
Well, we would,
things.
and if we had the
That's
pleasure.
only me,
No,
you
and if
know.
we had the pleasure of being able to do that, we would bring it back and discuss that. Absolutely.
That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Absolutely. No,
So
I totally
Let's say
get
we
that.
got approved let's say we go in with a 2.5 and they say, no, we're going to give you 2.9. I mean, then I'm going to say, well, let's go to the strategic plan and maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I'll wake
They might
up.
get us back to $400,000 for all we know.
Yeah.
We're never going to let that one down. Okay. I'll go with the 2.5.
All right, and finally, I'll,
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Can you just refresh my memory? Once the mayor comes back and says, I give you 1.6 or whatever it is, do we go back and relook at how we're allocating that? Or I don't remember if we did that.
We don't usually, I mean, what we'll do is we start working on that, that's for certain. We will come back, I mean, again, this is something that we really have to stress to the mayor, that the 2.4 is a hard sustained number. And I don't think that, last year we had I believe it was 1.99. This, because we reduced the $400,000, technically, that would have been in our base, so our 2.4 would have been a 1.99. So the fact is that he's got to, we do have to continue to remind him of that, because our 2.4 is really our hard number. So if the mayor gave us a 1.6, then yes, we probably would be coming back to you sooner than later saying, this is what we're going to have to cut. And we do need to be transparent with our families at that point. Not in an alarmist manner. We're not going to say we're going to cut band and we're going to cut varsity sports and all those things that get people all riled up, but we're going to have to talk about different scenarios.
Okay.
So I thank you for bringing that up, because that's a really important point to be made.
well, that's a nice segue into my comment about, about band and capital non-reoccurring and musical instruments,
That's-
which happen to be on the list, which is not a,
It's like 10 grand.
yes, it's like $10,000, and I would like to see that included, because
Absolutely.
that's a group that, that's a cultural enhancement
Yeah, no, it's
for
in our
students.
list to
Okay.
put there.
Well, I wanted that pointed out, though, because that's really.
Yeah, that was one of the items that we removed last week, that we would put either in the 1% or,
Okay.
unencumbered funds or whatever, or capital, but it would be 1%.
And just as an aside, with our personalized learning goals, I think the CNA program is very important. You have students that will be able to step out into a job right out of high school, and a fairly good paying job. And then some students will use that as a stepping stone to nursing careers or another type of medical career, EMT or what have you. And by the way, we do have shortages in those areas in our state. So that, I think, is beneficial, not only to our students, but to other things that are needed in the state. So those are my comments, and with that, I can go with a 2.5% as well. And Mrs. Purcell, do you have another comment?
I just thought, Dr. Menzo, if you could just remind, I guess, TV Land, there were two other big drivers that drove this number up. One had to do with like 9% insurance, and one had to do with like 300,000 that we're not getting from the state or something like that.
There was a special ed
Yeah.
reduction. When we look at the amount of money that we are anticipating getting from the state of Connecticut, and this number changes. That's
Okay.
the challenge. And so, sometimes, we have to make the best decisions and use the best information we have at the time. So Mr. Barone, working with the other business managers, we working with special ed directors, determined that we're looking at a 70% reimbursement rate from the state of Connecticut. That, as we shared in past, it has been as high as 80%. We haven't seen an 80 in years. So more realistically, we're looking at a 70 to 73% reimbursement. So we have to be conservative there. So when you look at that and you factor that in, that's where we have about a $300,000 difference in cost there. And then, as you said, also the insurance increase this coming school year for our staff, it's based on the Talents Plan. So that's a 9% increase. We won't see adjusted numbers on that, if we see adjusted numbers at all, until after you approve your budget to go to the mayor. Now, the mayor, again, will know that, so he might adjust our budget based on those adjustments, which is fine, because that makes sense, as long as, again, it's only making the adjustment based on those adjustments, not adjusting it further, because we don't have as much room as we've had potentially in the past to continue to reduce the sustained services.
Okay, so we kind of got the barometer, and folks had their comments about what they could go with. So I just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that, and then we'll just go around one more time and take the actual consensus of if everybody's comfortable for the most part with the 2.5. All right, we'll start with Mrs. Corso.
Yes.
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 And yes, thank you. All right, strategic plan review priority list, I think we've pretty much
You've
done
already
that.
combined it together.
But can I just, I would like, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I do like Aaron's idea about, and I'm not sure exactly when we should do it, but look at that 1% account, and our priorities the same that we thought they were a year ago, or, whenever we allocated. I think that's a very valid point. To look at that, and like you said, Sal, maybe there's a reason why they didn't get fulfilled, and maybe they're not a priority, and priorities do change. So I'm not sure exactly when the magic time is to look at that, but
Well, let's
yeah.
let's first try to get the list to you. If we
Sure.
can't do it by Monday, let's
Yeah,
try to
that's
get
fine.
it by
Well,
our board
whenever.
meeting. And then I think that the March meeting will probably be tough at the operations meeting, because it's going to be the facilities presentation. But we can
just in the back of our minds. Whether,
Absolutely.
Whether it's April, May, maybe May. Well, I know you like to have this approved.
Well,
but
that
this
has
is
nothing to
really
do with it.
This
It's
is
two
not
separate
relevant.
things.
They are totally separate things. And thank you for saying that. But I do think there's an opportunity to look at that, and can we reallocate things there? So I appreciate that comment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Next steps and additional information needed. I think we want that information that Mrs. Corso had requested. Are there any other requests from board members for additional information?
I just want to thank you for your detail with some of the answers to these questions.
Yes.
Well, that
I
was
mean, you
the
spent
team.
this last couple,
It's not me. It's the team.
It was
So
very, very comprehensive.
just
Yeah.
we all triage. We put it together in a Google Doc, and we sit there, and everybody's spell checking each other, and then deleting inadvertently. Not that I have ever done that. And then going back to revision record and being appropriately accused. So that's just my fault. But
So, life after, your superintendent could be a communication specialist.
I actually might be willing to take that job now.
Sal and I talked about it earlier.
All right, we're up to the portion of our agenda, which is public comment. Are there any comments from the public?
Are you going to do a final consensus or no?
We just did
We
the
just did.
consent.
Oh, okay, so
Yes.
that's true, we did.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
I
we did.
promise you. I'm not letting that
I
go
guess
by
I
the
fell
wayside.
asleep there for a second.
Any comments from the public? Yes. Would you please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record? Thank you so much.
Sure, ma'am.
My name is Adelaide Kopfer. I live on 35 Whiffletree Road. I have 2 kids in the system. My question is, because the last time I saw the strategic plan priorities list, it looked different. So if you say all the capital projects have been taken out, does the board still discuss those?
Yes, those, what we mean by taken out, and it was in, when I sent the link out to all families after the last meeting, the key thing is that those items go now to the mayor, and we share with him, and based on past history, we know those are items that he has approved. So we would look for him to provide that capital funding for those projects. Some of the projects were considered capital projects, and then the remaining items were one-time expenditures. So that goes back to the slide that I have. I'll show you right here. I apologize. Oops, sorry. When we look at this, there was about $500,000 in capital expenditures that we will go to the mayor and say, in addition to our 2.5% increase, we're also looking for $500,000 of capital expense. And then the $529,500, we would earmark right now, looking at where we are with our unencumbered fund balance, which is just over $700,000, we would look to use $529,500 for those other items. So that would still leave us, if we were to end the year tomorrow, that would leave us with about $175,000 that we could still allocate towards one-time expenditures,
Okay. I guess you know why I'm here.
which is good.
Some of the line items in the former strategic priorities list, and I guess some of the capital expenditures now, was the replacement of oil tanks. And I would like to ask the board to go back to those items and discuss. I understand it's mandatory to take them out, but do we really need to replace them? An oil tank has a lifespan of about 30, 40 years, which is a really long time from now. We might not even be here anymore, but the students will. And I guess everybody by now has heard the IPCC, whatever report. We have 12 years to stop making mistakes. Can we really replace oil tanks and keep doing what we have been doing? Or should we try again and look at other options that we could probably hopefully find to heat our schools?
And that's why
And
we're
I'm-
so excited to have
And
you volunteer.
I'm happy to volunteer my time and put a lot of time and energy and help management and administration to find other options, because I really think we need to look at this. I don't know if you have heard about Greta Thunberg, if I say it right. Out in Europe, students go on strike every Friday, and it's a growing amount of students, because they feel like this is the most urgent item right now. We need to act on climate change. We need to look at how we heat our schools, and if we have the opportunity right now to exchange that part, I think we should do it.
Well, you made a very happy person today at central office when I told Mr. Deptula that you had reached out, and then I forwarded your email to him, and he had seen your other questions. that we tried to respond to as much as we could.
Yes, I appreciate those details too. It's a 3-page list.
So it was
Thank you
it
very
was all
much.
good. But the thing is that we're really excited, and there's opportunities within town that we need to help with other commissions too. As we move forward on this topic. But Mr. Deptula has been also looking, because we're looking at some performance contractors to look at how to our total energy efficiency plan for the district, revitalizing that plan. So I know that you'll be receiving a call and having that meeting, and we can't thank you enough. And you're always so proactive and so approachable, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope the board takes it to heart.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Definitely.
and thank you for your willingness to serve on that.
Oh, yeah.
Other comments from the public? Any comments further from the public? Seeing none, this
Just,
meeting...
just to
okay.
remind everybody, because you took consensus this evening, there will be no meeting next Wednesday.
Oh, good
Okay.
point.
So I will, when I put out this revised PowerPoint, because I did see one little formatting
Glitch.
error that I wanted to make certain, when I send this out to parents, I'll let them know that the meeting on the 13th has been canceled.
Perfect.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.